Can people in the back hear me? Oh, good. Okay. Thank you all for coming. This is part of a new series that the History Department is doing this year called Open Lectures in History. And I did a lecture in September on the birth of the atomic bomb. My trusty, albeit clumsy, running partner, Dr. Ott, will be giving a talk in March about women's history. And today we have Dr. Hubbs here to talk about the history of Southern University on the 160th anniversary. Everybody really, at a college like this, every college that's a small liberal arts college needs somebody like Guy Hubbs. You need somebody who serves. You really need somebody who serves as the institution's memory, as somebody who knows its traditions, and who also articulates its core values. And you all probably have received copies of this book, the booklet that he did, A Compelling Idea, that's handed out during orientation. You memorized it, you sleep with this under your pillow at night. Oh, I'm hearing an edited form of this, okay. Guy legitimately earned his PhD in history from Alabama. And before his retirement from Birmingham-Southern, he taught a variety of classes for the history department, including our U.S. history surveys, an ES class on the liberal arts, a course on Tocqueville, and also our research and methods seminar. He's also the author of several publications, including Guarding Greensboro, which won the Jefferson Davis Award, and most recently he wrote Searching for Freedom After the Civil War. His scholarship, as you can see, has received some mixed reviews, but Guy is currently working on a bicentennial history of Tuscaloosa and also a conceptual book about gratitude. So let's show Guy some gratitude and welcome him here. Okay.
Thanks, Will, I guess. And thanks to the History Department for inviting me to this series. And thanks to all of you for showing up. So what's Southern about Birmingham-Southern? Well, the short answer is Southern University. Our mother institution, founded in 1856. And as you can see, their colors were not black and gold. During the origins of Southern University, though, go back before 1856, decades before. During the 1820s and 30s, Alabama was the chosen land for many a young man seeking to make his fortune. Some came by wagon, others by steamboat, some hailed from Virginia and the Carolinas, others from Connecticut, Nova Scotia, even Ireland and Germany. Some came alone, others brought their families, but no matter how they came, from where or with whom, the destination of choice was the fertile soil of the Alabama Black Belt, where cotton grew as nowhere else in the world at that time. Immigrants found themselves on a frontier where society itself was wholly unorganized, and the law powerless, in their words. In a letter to his father back home in Virginia, one of them put it plainly: "The people are from all quarters and care no more for each other than dogs do, except if it is to cheat you. A heterogeneous mass of people," he continued, "they don't know nor do they care for each other." He understated the problem. A charlatan without money could buy land simply by proclaiming that he was good for it. And to anyone who dare refuse him credit, a quick hand on the bowie knife would redress that insult. Without a network of friends and relatives to vouch for one's character, reputations were always in doubt. The well-dressed gentleman might have a warrant on his head back east. The kindly fellow carrying a Bible and wearing a parson's collar might well be a thief in disguise. Swindling was not merely respectable, but in their words, raised to the dignity of the fine arts, according to one recent arrival. Writers portrayed these unscrupulous characters in their novels, of which the rollicking bestseller, The Adventures of Simon Suggs, is the prime example. This is Suggs. And it was a bestseller, by the way. Suggs, who keeps close to his motto, "It is good to be shifty in a new country," is the original frontier con man who goes about fleecing Alabamians at every turn. In one chapter, he arrives at a camp meeting in East Alabama, professes to get religion, and then vamooses with the worshipers' offering after proclaiming that he is now a missionary headed to China. If this sounds familiar, Mark Twain lifted this chapter completely and set it in the middle of Huck Finn with the Duke and the Dauphin as Simon Suggs. And those who were not stealing money were growing it. Cotton, cotton is all they talk about, wrote one young woman of the young planters in the Black Belt town of Greensboro. They don't care for anything else. And the whole country was mud and mire. These young men hardly lived like the Tarleton twins sipping mint juleps on the front porch of Tara. Instead of the devil-may-care leisure portrayed in Gone with the Wind, the young men living in Black Belt towns toil long and hard to make a buck, whether it be selling and buying land, taking debtors to court, or minding the details of their plantations. This involves constantly moving about, uprooting their families, especially as new cotton lands would open up farther west. One fellow came back into town after an absence of 6 months and recognized no one. Such comings and goings made attempts to build community feelings, as they called it, particularly difficult. No man knows when he gets acquainted, one wrote back to his parents in New England, whether he will ever know him long enough to make it worth his while to cultivate his friendship. These Alabamians faced a daunting task. Without concerted and deliberate efforts, friendships would remain shallow and creating a civic society unlikely. But residents in small towns in Alabama, like those across America, did in fact make those concerted and deliberate efforts. They worked on projects to promote commercial ventures, to establish fraternal organizations and churches, to push for moral reforms, to do all sorts of things together that could not be done individually. In the process of working alongside each other on these limited goals, they began to depend upon each other, and that dependence in turn led to intricate networks of flexible, voluntary communities that suited their times. This, of course, is Lower Alabama. Not long after joining together to build roads and bridges, they started to focus on education. The proper training and education of our children is the most important duty of our lives, wrote one resident of Greensboro without a hint of hyperbole. Certainly, many, though, agreed with Thomas Gradgrind, whose students were taught in the traditional manner. Now what I want is facts. Teach these boys and girls nothing but facts. Facts alone are wanted in life. Plant nothing else and root out everything else. Facts, I say, nothing else will be of any service to them. Charles Dickens was surely right to call those hard times. Others, however, believe that the larger purpose of education lay instead in preparing individuals to be responsible citizens, capable of carrying on the great American experiment in self-government, an experiment threatened by ignorance. Added to that was their concern that in this age of spectacular scientific and technological achievements, particularly steam and telegraph, too many grasping men on the make had taken undue advantage of those very achievements to profit at others' expense. The reformers wanted their children to have an education that would give them tools to rise above their dog-eat-dog world. The Methodists were not merely in agreement with those educational reformers, they were among its leaders. In 1830, they had opened the state's first college, LaGrange, which is off the map to the north, eventually to become the University of North Alabama. And in 1839, they established the Coeducational Centenary Institute in Dallas County, which I could probably, yeah, it's right about in there. Okay. This is neat. So it was quite in keeping with Methodist priorities when a call went out at the 1854 annual session of the Alabama Conference to build a great university. They acknowledged that the State University in Tuscaloosa already provided a fine secular education to cultivate the intellect in arts and sciences. But what was now needed, according to the Methodists, were complementary institutions. No man is educated how much he may know who has a bad heart. Moral and religious instruction would try to develop the latent capacities to transform the helpless infant into a good and wise man, fitted to serve God and this generation on earth. The conference agreed to a university, but in typical Methodist fashion, they left it up to a committee to decide where. Yes, I see laughs out there. Methodists like committees. The committee, in turn, left it up to the towns to decide. In other words, they held an auction. The new Methodist University would be established in the town that most fervently demonstrated its commitment by subscribing $100,000. The choice quickly boiled down to Greensboro and Auburn, both wealthy cotton towns, and a spirited squabble soon erupted between the Greensboro Beacon and the Auburn Gazette. And for those of you who don't know, all right, Greensboro is right there, now in Hale County, then in Greene County. Tuscaloosa is up here, and Auburn is on the railroad. It's a recently built town on the railroad in East Alabama. So you've got West Alabama and East Alabama, both conspiring for this university. The Black Belt is a thin, relatively thin band of extremely fertile soil that goes in a great crescent from up this area all the way down, and it peters out along about Phoenix City. Many of the arguments that the Beacon and the Gazette brought forth were petty, with each side exaggerating the advantages of choosing their own site and the disastrous consequences of locating the university in the other. The wealth and intelligence of the citizens, access by rail, or the lack thereof in Greensboro, and dozens of other issues were all hashed and rehashed. The editor of the Gazette even went so far as to take a census of the Auburn graveyard in order to prove Auburn's superior health. One charge, however, stuck. Auburn residents were morally superior, the Gazette boasted, because the village strictly prohibited liquor. Greensboro, by contrast, had 3 liquor establishments for its population of 800. I'm not sure how many liquor establishments Auburn has today. In the end, Greensboro came up with $168,000, a huge sum of money for the day, while Auburn could only pledge $111,000. Greensboro was chosen as the site of Southern University. Townsmen fired cannon to celebrate the news. All was not great news, however. The legislators who passed Southern University's charter on January the 25th, 1856, our birthday, had thrown in a corker Auburn's claim to a more temperate citizenry had clearly left its mark. Section 4 of the charter decreed that from the first day of March 1857, no alcoholic beverages of any kind were to be sold within 5 miles of Greensboro. Greensboro, sold to the Methodists, read a banner hung across Main Street after the law went into effect. Meanwhile, Auburnites continued behind the scenes to press the same legislators who had incorporated Southern University. And shortly thereafter, the General Assembly also incorporated, over the governor's veto, East Alabama Male College. In short order, the Methodists and the Greensborians hired Adolphus Hayman to design their university. The Prussian-born architect had, since 1837, been living in Nashville. He's in a Mexican war uniform here, where he was especially renowned for designing public buildings, including churches, hospitals, courthouses, and theaters. Most recently, he was gaining a reputation for collegiate architecture, especially the University of Nashville and the successor to LaGrange College, now located in Florence. On a hot June day in 1857, 3 months after the ban on alcohol went into effect, a procession formed on Main Street about 11 in the morning. When the local militia, Oddfellows, Masons, and prominent citizens, clergy, and orators reached the university site east of town, they were met by the largest crowd ever assembled in the county, perhaps 5,000. After a prayer and music, the cornerstone was laid with appropriate documents inside. The crowd heard speeches, more music, and a concluding prayer. The ceremony was something quite simple, something quite American, something quite noteworthy. With its medieval towers and crenellation, Southern's university Gothic details were intended to pay homage to the great universities of Oxford and Cambridge. Here in brick and mortar was a link to a cultured and intellectual past that few, if any, Greensborian had ever seen. Indeed, such a grand and ancient-looking structure in a town of transients only a few decades old, a university towering above cotton fields just wrenched out of the wilderness, all of that was quite bizarre. But Alabama's lack of a real history was precisely why it was so necessary to create one on the spot. When construction neared completion, the Greensboro Beacon editor could proudly report that some 700 donors had contributed enough to sponsor 8 chairs at $25,000 each, this amounting to a huge endowment to match the impressive building. In return, Southern University would create a diffusion of intelligence, refinement of taste, and building of friendships. In Greensboro, the university was bound to bring eminent people to town, the editor predicted, and to fill the air with music and oratory. Greensborians had reason to be proud. Thus, it was with great hopes that in 1859, Southern University admitted its first students, 52 in all. 2 years later, the Reverend William M. Whiteman stood to deliver his baccalaureate address. Chancellor Whiteman began his speech by stressing the scholarly habits that the university had developed in its students. Yes, the graduates were now well prepared to enter the professional studies that would ensure their success. But gaining personal glory and amassing huge fortunes was not the ultimate purpose of their studies at Southern University. That lay elsewhere. The great point to be considered, he told them, is not so much what you shall get, as what you shall become, what you shall do to bless your generation. The graduates that day found Whiteman's great point to be compelling, as did generations of students thereafter. It would incorporate it into Southern University's alma mater with the line, "A life of valiant service thou hast made our goal." The great point would drive the curriculum. Succeeding presidents would embrace it, although phrasing would always prove a challenge. Academic excellence as preparation for a life of selfless service was simply too long and too stodgy. Education for service flowed better. No matter, it all boiled down to making the world a better place than you found it. Southern University was preparing young people to rise above this aggressive, predatory, and materialistic age. An unprepared individual was easy prey for the likes of Simon Suggs. But with the right training, that individual would not be caught up in the destructive, mindless, and soulless pursuit of mammon. He would instead be free of that world and then ironically ready to serve that world. Although the Chancellor did not quote Martin Luther on Christian liberty, he well could have. "We are free, subject to no one," wrote Luther. "We are servants, subject to all." The students of Southern University would graduate as servant leaders, as Christian heroes in this great moral warfare of life, in the words of one trustee. But back to the baccalaureate address. The Chancellor continued by predicting that Southern University's graduates would soon occupy positions in departments of service. When he was speaking that July of 1861, departments of service had an immediate reference, for in January of that same year, Alabama had declared its independence from the United States, and a few weeks later had joined the Confederate States. The American Civil War erupted April the 12th when Confederate batteries in Charleston, South Carolina opened fire on the Union-held Fort Sumter. Service very well might mean military service. The news reached Greensboro the next day of Fort Sumter. 51 young men immediately joined the local militia company. One Southern University student went off into the woods to pray. He would lie dead 2 years later. By the time Chancellor Whiteman delivered his baccalaureate address in July, most of the Southern University students had already departed to fight at Manassas, Virginia in the war's first battle. Those who remained turned athletic games into military drill before they too decamped for the front. 2 students graduated in 1863 and none in 1864. And by the way, lest you think that I pulled this Confederate cover out of archives for you, one just like it sold a few weeks ago for over $17,000. If we had it, it had been sold by now. The end of fighting found the once hope-filled Southern University weighted down with burdens. Not enough students enrolled in 1865 to form even one class. And after the Reverend Whiteman was elected to the episcopacy the next year, he resigned. But those problems were dwarfed by the lack of money. Southern University's once great endowment was simply gone. It had been built on cotton, but in response to the Union blockade, England had found new sources for the lint in India and Egypt. The South, and with it Southern University, never recovered. Debt piled up, the university was sued, the faculty went unpaid. The low point was reached at the end of the 1872 session when serious consideration was given to shutting the place down. That same year, the Methodists presented to the state East Alabama Male College, that same college that the legislators had incorporated back in 1856 along with Southern University. Thus was born Alabama Agricultural and Mechanical College, now Auburn University. Think about it. Birmingham-Southern and Auburn, separated at birth. I didn't do that. Okay, the state quickly designated its new school as Alabama's land-grant college, making it eligible for federal funds. Education at Auburn and elsewhere would henceforth be technical and secular, a good recipe for success in the industrializing New South. Unlike Auburn, Southern University kept on its same path and even tried to fulfill its founder's original plan to create a full university. That meant 4 separate colleges or schools: law, medicine, theology, and the liberal arts. Southern did manage to establish schools of law and medicine among the state's earliest, but these did not last long. A school of theology never materialized, and religion was folded into the liberal arts, the only one of the 4 that endured. This, by the way, is the auditorium of Southern University looking straight out the front door. As Whiteman had predicted, Southern University's graduates did indeed enter departments of service. A great many became lawyers and statesmen. Thomas C., for example, became governor in 1886 and was reelected in 1888. The alumni included a fair number of physicians, although only about a half dozen of those graduated from Southern's medical college. Many Southern graduates entered the ministry, and 4 of those became Methodist bishops. The rest used their liberal arts education in a variety of other fields. Studying did not consume every moment, of course. From the start, the student body was divided into 2 literary societies, the Clariosophic and the Belles-Lettres. Every student belonged to one or the other from the very beginning. This was the rule at colleges throughout the 19th century. The University of Alabama, for example, had its Philomathic and Erosopic societies. The students would debate the great issues of the day, with each society taking one side or the other. Does the South's future lie in agriculture or industry? Should the country stay on the gold standard or bring in silver? That sort of thing. In a time when oratory dominated, literary societies provided important training for those who would become leaders. And after all, that is what Southern University was all about. The Clariosophic and Belles-Lettres societies also provided structure for social and athletic activities. Here we have the 1908 football teams. Guess who won? If you can't read it, the Clariosophic guys have Bells Ain't Scored here, and they have their favorite right here, and the Belles-Lettres don't look too happy. I love his sweater, it says B for Belles-Lettres. Football, in fact, was a controversial sport at Southern. After being introduced in the last decade of the 19th century, the Southern University faculty criticized football as too violent, dangerous to life, even banning intercollegiate games for a time. Besides, the 1909 Southern University team never scored a point. The faculty simply deplored the way it glorified rowdyism and ungentlemanly deportment. That's a quote. Tennis, by contrast, was played with gentlemanly deportment. Student life at Southern University remained quiet and peaceful, perhaps even dull. The great excitement one year came after a student was seen riding through Greensboro. The university threatened Miss Whitmire with expulsion, not for galloping at high speed, but for refusing to ride side saddle. Southern University certainly faced unenviable challenges of economic decline, the isolation of Greensboro, and the looming behemoths of Auburn and the University of Alabama. Enrollment peaked in 1889 at a whopping 238 students. The contrast could not have been greater 80 miles to the northeast. During the 1870s, two major railroad lines crossed where coal, limestone, and iron ore, the necessary ingredients for making iron, lay in abundance. Here was the chance to build an industrialized New South shorn of any ties to the old. Birmingham, the magic city, was everything Greensboro was not. Methodists in North Alabama floated proposals to move Southern University from the inaccessible and unsatisfactory Greensboro to a location closer to the action. But Southern University stayed put, keeping its doors open to sons and daughters of black belt planters. So a second Methodist college was created on top of a hill that overlooked the massive Inslee Steelworks. Students first enrolled at North Alabama Conference College, just rolls off the tongue, in the fall of 1898, soon to be renamed Birmingham College. The decision to build a second institution split the denomination's already insufficient resources. And when the country entered World War I, too many Birmingham College students enlisted to fight, and too many Southern University students did the same. It seemed like 1861 all over again. The only solution lay in merging the two schools. The doors of Southern University shut in September of 1918. At the same time, Birmingham College welcomed Southern's students and faculty to its Hilltop campus. Henceforth, it would be one school, Birmingham-Southern College, with that ever-important hyphen in there standing in for the merger. And by the way, you can look, the seal of BSC takes the motto from Southern and the lamp of education from Birmingham College. So, say you want to see Southern University today. Where do you go? Well, drive 50 miles down I-5920. When you get to Tuscaloosa, hang a left at exit 71A. You head down Highway 69 for 35 miles and you arrive in the middle of Greensboro, still one of the most beautiful towns of Alabama, famed for its antebellum architecture, the Pie Lab, and a few other neat things. When you get to Main Street, take a left, and after a mile, you'll be there. Unfortunately, Southern University will not. Adolphus Haman's masterpiece was destroyed in a horrific May 1973 tornado. By the way, I was in southern Mexico and heard about that tornado. It is deemed the longest tornado ever recorded, traveling nearly 150 miles from Demopolis to Talladega. Fortunately, most of Greensboro was spared, unlike Britt, Alabama, where my mother's family came from, which was destroyed. You can still see the handmade bricks of Southern University, by the way, which were recovered and used to build one of the state's ugliest academies on the same site where Southern stood. The Chancellor's home, where Whiteman lived, did survive, and you can see that. And you can travel up to Nashville to see the University of Nashville, which was Haman's first draft. Southern University was instead built of brick, not stone, and on a much grander scale. If you will look, if you compare like the windows and the distance between the windows and above the windows, also the projection of the front, much larger at Southern University. It was a much grander building. The doorways are the same, the windows are the same, the crenellation, the proportions are all the same. So it was really a first draft for him. They liked his University of Nashville so much, they said, just do us a better job. But if you really want to see Southern University today, you will need to look elsewhere. For despite a civil war, a shattered economy, competition from state-sponsored universities, and a growing secularism, despite all, Southern University's vision is with us still. When Guy Snavely became president of the newly created Birmingham-Southern College, he recommitted the new school to prepare men and women for better and nobler service to God, country, and fellow man. He called it Education for Service. While Snavely was president, students helped out at settlement houses in Inslee's Italian district, and efforts like that continued for decades. In the late 1980s, service learning was integrated into the academic program, now the endowed Bunting Center for Engaged Study and Community Action. And in 1992, BSC formally established a Distinction in Leadership Studies program, later endowed as the Hess Center for Leadership and Service. As a fully integrated academic program, it remains unique among colleges in the South and one of the few in the country. Today, these and other initiatives are housed under the Krulak Institute for Leadership, Experiential Learning, and Civic Engagement. Whether as a part of a structured program or on their own initiative, perhaps 2/3 of BSC students engage in service work or leadership projects each year. Exactly 150 years after Chancellor Whiteman's baccalaureate address to the 1861 graduates, interim President Mark Shantz delivered the baccalaureate address to the 2011 graduates. He began with the same words spoken a century and a half before. The great point to be considered is not so much what you shall get as what you shall become, what you shall do to bless your generation. The great point is what sets us apart, as it has from the start. Then rapacious go-getters were consumed with making money. Community feelings were hard to find. People remained wary lest someone take their advantage. Unfortunately, our times are not so very different from theirs. And the great point that was set forth at Southern University so many years ago is as needed today as it is then. Thank you.